I'm Paul Steiglitter. I spent 30 years in law enforcement, beat cop to deputy sheriff, working 10 hours a day to protect and serve. Last year in Oregon, there were 13,000 citations and arrests for marijuana. Yes on 91 will allow law enforcement to focus on serious crimes, unsolved murders, rapes, missing kids. Measure 91 also mandates that Oregon develop standardized tests for driving under the influence, which we don't have now. That'll make our streets and highways safer. Yes on 91.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. We made it to the weekend. It is Friday, October 24th, 2014, and it's got to be 11 days until we legalize marijuana in Washington, D.C., in Alaska, and Oregon. It's 11 days until we legalize medical marijuana in Guam and in Florida. It's 11 days away until there are municipal and county votes in Colorado, in Michigan, in New Mexico for various marijuana reforms, and we'll bring that all to you live here on election night, Tuesday, November 4th. Join us starting at 3 p.m. Pacific. We've got reporters in all of those locations who will be bringing us the live results as they happen from their city, county, or state. Tune in to 420 Radio for all your cannabis news. That's coming up Tuesday, November 4th. And don't forget to vote. If you don't vote, we can't win. Welcome to today's show. All sorts of great stuff to bring you in the next 2 hours, including an exclusive interview from the folks at Show Me Cannabis in Missouri with Jeff Miszansky, a man who is serving life without parole for marijuana in the state of Missouri. We will get to his interview at 1:30 with this extended interview you won't want to miss. Jeff Miszansky and ShowMeCannabis.com. Also on today's show, we get to announce breaking news that the High Times Cannabis Cup in Denver next year will be the first 3-day High Times Cannabis Cup, April 18th, 19th, and 20th of 2015. You can check out more information on that at cannabiscup.com. Also on today's show, there was an article out in Washington Monthly today from Mark A.R. Kleiman. If that name sounds familiar, he's the man behind Botech, the company that was hired to consult on Washington State's legal marijuana regulations. He says he's voting yes on Measure... He would vote yes. He's a Californian, but he would vote yes on Measure 91 here in Oregon. But he doesn't give us that without a full-scale diss of what he thinks we're doing wrong with Measure 91. I'll tackle that in Behind the Headlines to give you the idea of what Mark thinks ought to be the right way to legalize marijuana. And then in Drug War Data Mining, I'll puncture a hole in his primary assumption as to why Measure 91 is doing things the wrong way. So stay tuned for that kind of a two-part thing in Behind the Headlines and Drug War Data Mining. Also on the show today, we get to your 420 Radio headline news and all sorts of great stories in the news today, including another update on the Halloween medible candy scare coming out of Colorado. Also from Colorado and Washington, we get word that ATMs are no longer working in many locations, hundreds of locations. There's also a vote in Washington state that a lot of people don't know about that could have huge ramifications for the taxation of marijuana in that state. The Arizona Court of Appeals this week ruled on the state's medical marijuana law and whether that protects medical marijuana patients from DUI charges. And we've got a new estimate on what the marijuana industry would be if the entire United States, federal and all 50 states, had legal marijuana. The numbers will, well, they probably won't surprise you, but they are nice to read, that's for sure. And then we'll take things into Hour 2 Toker Talk Radio. We'll take your calls at 971-533-7111. And we encourage you to stay tuned for later tonight at 8 p.m. for the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Herb's got another great guest joining us from the record industry. We'll be talking to him and going over some of the best music being released today in independent stoner, heavy metal, and doom rock. So check that out. Herb Thrasher Flower Hour tonight, 8 p.m. Pacific, with replays Saturday at 8 p.m. Pacific. We're back with the news right after these messages.
Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, the world's voice of marijuana legalization.
In all my years on the streets, it's hard to recall a single time where marijuana use itself was the cause of a violent incident. As a police officer, I do believe that passing ballot measure 2 will allow law enforcement to focus on serious issues in Alaska. To me, the regulation of marijuana means safer communities. I'm voting yes on 2.
This communication was paid for by the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. Top contributors are Marijuana Policy Project, Drug Policy Alliance, and Thomas.
420radio.org is proud to replay the Hot Box podcast with Matt Lee and Ian Baker from Kalispell, Montana. The Hot Box is a weekly talk show focused on the failed war on drugs, mainly cannabis, dissecting the latest mainstream marijuana news, medical cannabis legislation, and everything else weed-related, from growing to smoking and everything in between. Catch the replays Thursday at 11 Pacific on 420.
Voting yes on 2 will allow doctors to recommend the medicine they feel will ease the pain and suffering of thousands of sick Floridians. Yes on 2 allows medical marijuana use under the strict supervision of a doctor, only for debilitating conditions and diseases such as cancer and MS. 23 states now keep government and politicians out of the doctor-patient relationship, and it's worked. Vote yes on 2 and trust our doctors to do what's best.
It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is your 420 Radio News for Friday, October 24th, 2014. Just in time for Halloween, a Colorado company is releasing a home testing kit that allows parents to screen their kids' candy for marijuana. The product release comes on the heels of a local hospital and police department warning parents that edible marijuana can easily be mistaken for Halloween candy. CB Scientific has come up with a $15 kit that empowers parents to test candy for THC, the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. The kit works essentially the same way as a home pregnancy test kit. The test kits turn pink to red upon the presence of THC. The redder the result, the more potent the product. This may also help medical marijuana users who want to get a sense of how potent their medical marijuana products are. The test kits can be purchased online at cbscientific.com. They are sold locally at select marijuana dispensaries, Way to Grow garden centers, and Freaky's head shops. Hundreds of ATMs located in medical marijuana dispensaries, the lifeblood of businesses otherwise forced to work in cash, were shut down Wednesday, just days after similar machines were unplugged from recreational shops. The machines in Colorado and Washington were connected to a network served by South Dakota-based MetaBank, which in January warned ATM providers by email that machines located in marijuana shops violated federal banking rules. But the machines, both cashless and the traditional cash dispensing variety, continued to work until this week, according to owners of cannabis shops affected by the shutdown. Marijuana Industry Group Executive Director Michael Elliott said a number of the trade group's clients lost standalone machines that dispense bills, as well as keypadded devices that are found at checkout counters and don't spit out cash. On November 4th, Washington residents will vote on Advisory Question Number 8, a ballot measure that would urge the legislature to either maintain or repeal Senate Bill 6505, which deemed the marijuana industry to be non-agricultural, thereby removing excise tax protections that apply to the state's agriculture industry. This redefining of the industry will permit, if allowed to stand, more than $25 million in higher taxes over the next decade than would have otherwise been the case. The estimated effective tax rate on marijuana products in Washington state is approximately 44%. In light of the onerous tax treatment of marijuana products and companies tied to that industry, it would be a positive development for Washington voters to vote to repeal on Advisory Question 8 and urge lawmakers in Olympia to reverse the non-agricultural reclassification that will beget such punitive taxation. The Arizona Court of Appeals on Tuesday ruled the state's medical marijuana law doesn't give drivers immunity from prosecution if there is marijuana or its chemical metabolites in the body. In December of 2011, Travis Lance Dara, a medical marijuana user, was charged with 2 counts of DUI, one based on impairment and the other based on the presence of marijuana or its metabolite in his system. A jury acquitted him of driving while impaired, but convicted him of driving under a DUI law that bans driving while having a prohibited drug or its metabolite in the body. Dara appealed, arguing all authorized medical pot users are immune from prosecution under the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act unless they drive while impaired. But the 3-judge panel disagreed and let Dara's conviction stand, despite the fact that the presence of inactive marijuana metabolites can remain in the bloodstream for weeks after use. If all 50 states legalized marijuana and the federal government ended prohibition of the plant, the marijuana industry in the United States would be worth $35 billion just 6 years from now. That's according to a new report from Green Wave Advisors, a research and advisory firm that serves the emerging marijuana industry in the United States. If the federal government doesn't end prohibition and the trajectory of state legalization continues on its current path, with more but not all states legalizing marijuana in some form, the industry in 2020 would still be worth $21 billion, Green Wave projects. In its $21 billion 2020 model, Green Wave predicts 12 states plus the District of Columbia to have legalized recreational marijuana. Besides Colorado and Washington, those states are Alaska, Arizona, California, Hawaii, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Nevada, New Hampshire, Oregon, Rhode Island, and Vermont. That's your 420 radio news for Friday, October 24th, 2014. I'm Russ Belville.
You can get 420 Radio on the go with our Shoutcast stream for all internet-enabled media players. Go to rad-r.us/420shout or just click the Shoutcast icon below the live radio feed at 420.
Measure 91 means regulating and legalizing marijuana for adults, freeing up time and generating revenue so police can better protect us from serious, violent, and unsolved crimes. The system needs changing. Yes, on 91, it's about time.
Congressman Andy Harris thinks it's okay for medical marijuana patients to go to federal prison, even though Maryland passed a medical marijuana bill in April. On May 30th, Congressman Harris voted against an amendment to respect Maryland laws and protect Maryland patients. Why would Congressman Harris vote to send patients like this to prison? 72% of Maryland residents support medical marijuana. Is Congressman Harris out of touch with Maryland?
The war on marijuana is wasteful, and it hasn't worked. The time and resources available to law enforcement in Alaska is limited. And to waste any of that time or money on marijuana is using a hammer to go after a mosquito. It's just crazy. I spent a career in law enforcement in Alaska. I'm voting yes on ballot measure 2.
This communication was paid for by the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. Top contributors are Marijuana Policy Project, Drug Policy Alliance, and Thomas Cody.
Welcome back, everyone. 14 after the hour. Time for us to go behind the headlines. And today I got a link to an article in Washington Monthly by Mark A.R. Kleiman, or as I like to call him, M-A-R-K. Mark. Guy's got a first name that's a recursive acronym. You gotta love it. He's the UCLA public policy professor whose company, Botech, consulted with the Washington State Liquor Control Board to regulate their marijuana program, their recreational program, excuse me. His recommendations resulted in far too few growers supplying far too few stores, leading to $35 a gram prices that pressured the state legislature to go after the plethora of unregulated medical marijuana dispensaries where marijuana costs $10 a gram. In comparison to Colorado, it would be fair to say Washington's legalization is not the better of the two plans. In his article, Mark weighs in on legalization in my state of Oregon through Measure 91. He writes, quote, Measure 91 does not reflect a sophisticated understanding of the problems of illicit markets or a nuanced view about substance use disorder. Focusing on the goal of eradicating the illicit cannabis market in Oregon, it doesn't pay enough attention to the risk that Oregon might become a source of illicit supply to neighboring states. Focusing exclusively on preventing use by minors, it neglects the risk of increasing dependency among adults. End quote. Once again, Mark begins with the same failed presumption that poisons every prohibitionist take on legalizing marijuana. That somehow more people smoking pot would be disastrous for them and society in general. Now, there's a thing in economics called the Pareto principle, and it tells us that 80% of consumption is driven by 20% of consumers. Mark and his ideological ilk like Kevin Sabet love to drive this point home. You know, that the liquor industry would collapse if the top 20% of drinkers would drink responsibly. That big alcohol must market to addicts and create more of them. And indeed, I saw a recent Washington Post chart showing that the top decile of drinkers consume some 70 plus drinks a week. Wow! And yet, Mark doesn't call for alcohol prohibition or some punitive taxation to rise the price of beer to some ridiculous, $50 a six-pack level or something. I digress. I have yet to hear from these prohibitionists what disaster befalls society from the top 20% of weed smokers. Now, we know what those 70 plus drinks a week people are doing to society. And I am certainly in the top decile of pot smokers. I use not just daily, but more like hourly. And yet I run a business, I have many friends, and I don't seem to be harming anyone that I can determine. So let's say, as Mark correctly opines, that completely legal marijuana with no restrictions and production of scale eventually gets a joint to the cost of a tea bag. That means I will be using as much marijuana as I currently do. Trust me, I can't really use very much more and still be able to type. And yes, some people who are using a little marijuana occasionally may end up using more marijuana more often. And maybe some of them get dependent on it and it adversely affects their lives. But much of what's considered dependence these days is when some outside entity, a school, an employer, a family, law enforcement, demands that the marijuana user stop using marijuana. And the marijuana user doesn't want to. Now, maybe it's justifiable. Maybe their grades are slipping, they're doing shoddy work, they're ignoring their responsibilities, they're committing crimes, whatever. But most of the time it's not. The Dean's List student, the employee of the month, and the behaving teen or adult are just as pressured to stop. Is that really dependence? Or is that just strong-willed refusal to surrender bodily sovereignty? A few of the things that Mark thinks ought to be done here with marijuana is he says that it'll be so cheap that lower prices won't change the behavior of adult casual users, but lower prices would matter a lot to frequent users, and most of all to frequent underage users, simply because what they spend on pot represents a significant element in their personal budgets. At current prices, the cost of a heavy cannabis habit can exceed $5,000 a year. Okay, and he also has this part where he says, saying that we'll keep it away from minors doesn't pass the giggle test because everyone knows how a minor can get alcohol from an older friend or from the hobo out front of the liquor store. Yeah, but at least the marijuana, the alcohol that they're getting from the hobo out front of the liquor store, from the friend or for the family liquor cabinet is labeled, marked and pure. You know what proof it is and you know you're not going to go blind from it. Also, he says that we should limit the total production canopy because our current low prices and the high supply we'll have will encourage diversion to neighbor states. Hey, man, that's Idaho's problem. That's Nevada's problem. That's the federal government's problem. It's not Oregon's problem. And furthermore, limiting the total production canopy is exactly what you did in Washington state that has now threatened the medical marijuana industry there and kept prices so high that the black market is thriving. He also tries to point out that we should have a high tax to keep that price where it is now. And that's what's causing all the violence, Mark. That's what's causing the problem is the price is so high that it's profitable to deal it illegally. But then he says we'll deal with that by having strong law enforcement to rein in the black market. You know, like we do now. So how is that an improvement on things? And finally, he says that we ought to, quote, rein in the medical marijuana market so that we don't have people undercutting the tax, which again, won't be that high of a tax here in Oregon. And then he says there's no need to have a parallel distribution system of patients buying medical supplies. Once again, ignoring the fact that it's damn hard to get on the Oregon medical marijuana program.
All we want to do is pump you up.
So we're going to attack Mark Kleiman's central tenet here, that we need to keep the price of marijuana high so it'll discourage the kids from using it. Stay tuned, and in Drug War Data Mining, we will compare the price of weed in America to how often kids are using it in America when we come back from break. Stick around.
You can get 420 Radio on the go with the TuneIn Radio app for all mobile platforms. Go to rad-r.us/420tunein or just click the TuneIn Radio icon below the live radio feed on 420radio.org. The Marijuana Business Association, or MJBA, are proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show. It is the mission of the MJBA to establish integrity and legitimacy, create common market standards, provide market intelligence, and develop best ethical business practices for participants in the emerging legal marijuana industry, including commercial hemp, medical marijuana, and recreational marijuana for adults. Learn more about the Marijuana Business Association and visit mjba.net to join today. That's mjba.net. Weed Porn Daily with Oscar Diaz from Florida, replaying Mondays at 12 Pacific on 420radio.org. Are you a hypocrite? If you live a closeted cannabis lifestyle, you are. Read about 7 people living a closeted cannabis lifestyle who are on the verge of coming out in The Hypocrites by Mara K. Eaton. Available at areyouahypocrite.net. You can purchase the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, also available on iTunes. Check out Mara K. Eaton on Facebook as well. Learn more at areyouahypocrite.net. Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Welcome back, everyone. 22 after the hour, and we're continuing our assault on Mark Kleiman's theory that we need to overtax marijuana to keep the price high, of course, to protect the children. Because if weed was much cheaper, more kids would use it and become addicted. Well, I decided to take a look at this because nobody wants the children becoming little Spicolis or Slaters. But so far in Prohibition, we've seen no strong correlation between a state liberalizing its marijuana policies, the price of marijuana, and the rate of teen use. And so I put together a little graphic, and this is available through my Pinterest account at RBShow420 if you'd like to get this data as well. Along the x-axis, we have mapped the average cost of a high-quality ounce from $200 to $400 an ounce. On the y-axis, we've correlated the rate of monthly marijuana use for adults in blue diamonds and teenagers in red squares from 3% to 12% per month. And as you can see, just from the scattering of dots there is no correlation between the price of weed and how much teens or adults are using it. Now, I consulted the crowdsource website priceofweed.com, and I jotted down the average price for a high-quality ounce in every state. Then I downloaded the 10-year compilation from 2002 to 2011 of state marijuana use data by state, broken down by teens age 12 to 17 and adults age 18 and older. And what I found was that the price was not a very strong predictor of how many regular teen or adult marijuana users there were in a state. My state, Oregon, currently has the lowest weed prices in the nation at $208 an ounce. Roughly 8.9% of our teenagers use marijuana monthly. But go to 2 nearby states, Idaho and Nevada, and you'll find weed costs about the same in those 2 states, $276 and $267 respectively, about $70 more. But Nevada has a full 2 percentage points more monthly teen use than Idaho does. In fact, Nevada has the same use as Oregon does, despite $70 higher prices. Vermont has the highest teen use rate in the nation at 12.2%, and its weed prices are almost the highest at $374 an ounce. But South Dakota weed costs about the same, $377, but far fewer South Dakota teens use monthly, 7.6%. North Dakota weed costs $20 more, and use is lower than South Dakota at 5.6%, but Rhode Island costs $50 less, and its use is lower than Vermont's too, at 10.9%. Mississippi and Connecticut are both decriminalization states. Now, I know Connecticut's got medical, but they didn't pass it till 2012, which is outside the range of this data set. And both have equivalent weed prices. It's $3.37 in Mississippi, $3.41 in Connecticut. But Connecticut has more than twice the teen use rates. Mississippi's at 4.4, Connecticut's at 9.3. And Mississippi's second lowest teen use rate of 4.4 is beaten by Utah at 4.2, even though the price of weed in Utah is cheaper by $50. Now, I know these are ridiculously high prices under the veil of marijuana prohibition. Maybe they don't tell us anything about what use would be like in a world of $20 ounces and legal acceptance. But again, I wonder, so what? Use of marijuana is not a statistic that happens in a vacuum. It's not as if marijuana use rates rising will occur independently of every other harm to self and society out there. Perhaps in a world of cheap legal marijuana, it becomes a rite of passage for young people and binge drinking becomes passé. If so, additional harms from a few kids becoming legitimately cannabis dependent will be more than offset by the kids not dying from alcohol poisoning and committing acts of violence or sexual assault. Perhaps in this new weed world, more adults begin replacing their cigarette and alcohol habits with more regular and social cannabis use. If so, reductions in drunk driving, spousal abuse, cancer, and cirrhosis should more than make up for any new adults with a pot smoking problem. And perhaps in Pottopia, more older folks start using cannabis where they used to use Tylenol, Ambien, Viagra, Prozac, Xanax, OxyContin, or Chardonnay. If so, despite the massive financial hit to those established purveyors of drugs, the overall health of the population increases far more than the health decline of a few people who might develop an unhealthy relationship with cannabis. And finally, whether Oregon's legalization leads to diversion to other states is not Oregon's problem, it's the federal government's. From my point of view, a flood of cheap, accessible weed to nearby states only hastens the day that those states abandon their treatment of me and my kind as criminals, so I can return to my birthplace of Nampa, Idaho, and convince my 72-year-old father to ditch his 7 Vicodin a day in favor of medical cannabis.
You can get 420 Radio on the go with the TuneIn Radio app for all mobile platforms. Go to rad-r.us/420tunein or just click the TuneIn Radio icon below the live radio feed on. A mom and grandma from No on Measure 91 explains why to vote yes on Measure 91.
I see what's happening with marijuana. The kids are telling me. They say within 5 minutes they can get marijuana. It's much easier than tobacco or alcohol to get into their hands.
Because drug dealers don't check ID. Vote yes on Measure 91. This advertisement produced by the Russ Belville Show and is not sponsored or endorsed by the Yes on Measure 91 campaign.
As part of your organization, Dan, you are essentially targeting...
Treating marijuana as a crime in Oregon has failed. Police are spending way too much time working on simple marijuana possession cases. Too many people are being busted. Oregon wastes millions of taxpayer dollars while illegal drug dealers are making a huge untaxed profit. But after Measure 91 passes, we'll have a better approach, a smarter approach, like what's happening in Washington, where marijuana-related arrests have plummeted. Oregon police will be able to refocus their precious and limited resources on serious crime, and Oregon's Measure 91 can save and generate millions of dollars. Oregon needs a better approach to marijuana. Vote yes on Measure 91, paid for by Yes on 91.
The cannabis community is a diverse set of people from all walks of life, conservative and liberal, black and white, straight and gay, rich and poor, and everyone in between. Learn more about the people we are freeing from adult marijuana prohibition in our Cannabis Community Chat.
Now we turn things over to Show Me Cannabis.
The Show Me Cannabis Podcast.
Hi YouTube, this is Show Me Cannabis Executive Director John Payne. A few weeks ago we traveled down to Jefferson City to visit Jeff Miszansky, where he is imprisoned there and has been for the last 21 years. If you're not familiar with his case, Jeff Miszansky is the nonviolent cannabis offender who has a sentence of life without parole for 3 nonviolent cannabis-only offenses. And we went down and we interviewed him, and that is what you're about to see. However, I just want to let you know that Prisons do not really, have the best quality for recordings. They put you in a big concrete room, the sound bounces around a lot, and there were some very loud vending machines in there. So basically the quality of the audio is not that great, but you're able to hear it, so go ahead and take a listen, and I think it's a very important interview, and you'll enjoy it a lot.
Well, before I got locked up, I was foreman 2 construction sites. Had 20 people working for me under each one. And I also had a small construction company of my own. We used to, the guys that really wasn't that experienced, we gave them a place to learn. And we went around and did jobs for people that really couldn't afford a big construction company to come in, The guys didn't get paid much, but they're able to put a roof on somebody that really couldn't afford it. We did stuff like that. Had raised a family, or was raising a family, and then got picked up on this marijuana. Got charged with, the judge said a life sentence, and the parole board tells me it's life without according to the statutes.
Yeah, I believe since it was you're charged under the prior and persistent drug offender because you had two priors for cannabis, and those were just for cannabis, right?
Right.
And have you ever been convicted of any sort of violent offense?
No.
Yeah. Have you ever? I mean, you've never committed any sort of violent offense ever, and so go through what sort of regular day is like here in prison. I know you're saying that you still work and contribute, but it's somewhat of the same stuff that you did on the outside, but a little bit different as well.
Yeah, well, I wake up about 4:30, 5 o'clock, drink some coffee, get ready to go to work. Usually, if you want to go to eat, it's somewhere between 5:30 and 6 o'clock, 6:30, somewhere in there, if you want to go eat breakfast. Come back in, and you go to, I go to furniture factory 4 days a week. We work 10 hours a day. And that's where I get to teach guys. I'm a lead, what they call a lead man down there. I get an area doing furniture finishing. And I get to teach them how to stain, spray, repair furniture, stuff like that. Get off at 4:30. We get to go eat and go back in the house. We have to lock down for count time at that time. Now, I'm fortunate because I'm in an honor wing, so after the count time at 6 o'clock, we're let out into the wing, or sometimes we have front yard rec, which is a small yard. You can go out there and walk, or they got small exercise stuff out there. Play basketball, that's about all you can do. Or like Wednesday night, we have what they call big yard. You go out and play handball or baseball or go to the gym, stuff like that. Do that for about 2 hours and come back in and get cleaned up, ready for bed. Starts all over again.
So you said you're in an honor wing. Is that reserved for offenders, prisoners that are have a good record and are on good behavior? Is that the idea behind that?
Basically, you have to fit their criteria. Yeah. You got to be right up free for so long. I forget all the criteria behind it, but you got to earn it.
Yeah.
Okay. Since I've been in for 20 years now, I've had 2 minor write-ups, and that was when I first got locked up, and back I think in '96. The last 2 minor write-ups I've had.
That is a mighty long time. In 1996, I was 13 years old, so that's been a little while. So, if you were free, what would you do? What would you hope your life would be like?
Well, I like to give it to family first of all. My parents passed away. I like to go see their graves. Get some closure there. But I'd really like to find some way that I could talk to people and help people, especially these kids that are on hard drugs. I mean, that's really killing our society out there. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm against kids doing any kind of drugs, even marijuana. But to be right honest with you, if I could talk a kid off of heroin to smoke a joint, I'd do it in a heartbeat. And I'd like to be able to do something like that. Of course, help the movement as far as getting marijuana legalized, because nobody deserves to be in here for marijuana.
Yeah.
Don't make no sense.
That actually kind of touches on the next point I was going to bring up. So that now that 2 states have legalized cannabis, and D.C. and 2 more states are going to vote on it in November, do you think the criminal justice system should go back and reconsider cases like yours and other people who are serving long sentences for nonviolent cannabis offenses?
It sure be nice. I think they should. I think they're finding out that marijuana is not the so-called bad, evil drug that it was portrayed to be when it got put off to be illegal. There's a lot of books out there if people would sit down and read. You can find out it's really helpful. I mean, even back when our country was born, farmers had to grow marijuana.
Yeah, grow hemp.
Right, and which is basically the same thing, it's just a weaker grade. I mean, the Egyptians used it. All through history has been used. Why all of a sudden in our time it's illegal? It don't make sense. Besides that, all medical. I mean, I just seen a piece on the TV where it said that the states that legalized it for medical, and of course the ones that can smoke it leisurely, their suicide rate, or not suicide, but their overdose rate has been down like 25%. Come on, people.
Yeah, it looks like they're substituting they're substituting cannabis for the more powerful painkillers like Vicodin and OxyContin, which are, people can overdose on quite easily.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
And marijuana is doing the job, so they don't have to go to those heavier drugs.
Yeah.
So
now, like I said earlier, you were sentenced under the prior and persistent drug offender statute, and this year the Missouri legislature voted to remove that from the criminal code. Now that doesn't go into effect until 2017, but nonetheless they've done that. And sort of along the same lines of the last question, do you think Governor Nixon should take that into consideration, that now the state legislature has said that this is not a good policy, so maybe they should look at that retroactively as well?
That would really be good, because there's guys in here who really deserve to be out, not just me, but I'm sure there's others. And they're realizing the faults of that, the way it was, the statute was wrote.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, the gentleman that originally put that in there said it wasn't meant to be used the way it's done. So, like everything else, they take it to the extreme and use it the way it's not meant to be, the way it was wrote. But, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. But it would be good, and I don't see why he wouldn't consider that. The simple reason is, I guess the legislation decided it wasn't right. So why wouldn't he go along with that?
If you could say anything to Governor Nixon personally, what would you say?
Cannabis is not as bad as what you think. People don't deserve to be locked up for marijuana. I think if you give me a chance to get out of here, I could help people get off of some of these hard drugs, which is really killing our kids. And I would really like to do that. I mean, 20 years, long enough for marijuana. I'm not saying I'm guilty, I'm not saying I'm innocent. It's never been about that. It's always been about, is the time right for the crime? In my case, I don't believe it has been.
So, if you could, what would you do to change the laws as they're currently written?
I'd like to see marijuana legalized. I mean, it would help our country. Think of the taxes that could be made off of it. They're always crying and screaming about not having enough money for our schools, for our roads, our infrastructure. My God, even if they had $100 on an ounce, if they gave the grower $20, taxes could be done. The state could get I mean, the federal government could get $50, that's 70, it still leaves 30. The state could get 10, the city could get 10, and the county could get 10. That's out of $100. It would help everybody all the way up and down the line, and also how much money would we save keeping guys like me in prison, from having to keep guys like me in prison, let alone the court system and all the hours that are wasted on finding marijuana dealers or people that smoke marijuana, either one, where they could be fighting these hard drugs. That's what's hurting us.
Yeah, they make more arrests for marijuana in most years than they do all of their drugs combined, about 20,000 a year, which is it's a pretty staggering number. I mean, you're from Sedalia originally.
Right.
That's about the population of Sedalia that they're arresting every year for cannabis.
That's a lot of money that's wasted.
Oh, yeah. That is definitely a lot of money that's wasted. It's about, I think the estimates are about $150 million a year just on enforcement costs, so that's pretty substantial.
On marijuana alone, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. That's staggering.
So how can people help you and others who are serving long sentences for nonviolent offenses?
Register to vote. It's your country. If you don't vote, you ain't got no say-so. One vote matters. When it does come up, register to pass it or register not to. I mean, or vote not to. You vote your mind. But I think people out there really looked at it and really read up on it, they vote for it because it just makes sense. I mean, if nothing else, do it for the kids. They need the money for the schools because they're not going to stop it. Too many people out there smoking it. A lot of them ain't admitting it. They're in the closet, so-called, but they're smoking it. Believe that. I know. I hear of it all the time.
Yeah, it's there's pretty much nowhere in the country that you can't get it somewhere. So, So since you've been locked up, what are the things that you have missed out on the most?
My family. My son ended up quitting high school because I wasn't out there. My grandkids, which I just found out last week. You know, Chris, he's got a grandson now. I just found that out last week. I'm also supposed to be a great-grandpa. That's coming up sometime this year. My parents passing away. Out there working. I enjoy working. I always did. Fortunately, I got a job in here. It ain't as much as I'd like to do, but it's one of the benefits is I got to meet quite a few people, not just like you, but even in here, because I got to realize how some people think. I've talked to a lot of them, and a lot of them are in here because of drugs. They may have committed a murder or something like that, but they were on hard drugs. I've never heard of anybody hurting anybody over marijuana. But it gives me something to do if and when I get out.
Yeah.
You know.
It's kind of ironic that sort of the point of, one of the missions of the prison is to rehabilitate people or get them ready to go back and be a productive member of society, but you already were a productive member of society when you were arrested.
Yeah, I just started a new job after I got arrested, and I bonded out for a while. I just started a job working for a company that was doing reclaim pits for MFA. We were doing all the chemicals and stuff, you know, they could put it on the ground. I just started that before I got in here, so that all went down the drain. Yeah. So, you know, and I've got no illusions. If I get out, it's going to be hard. I'm 61 years old. 20 years, I haven't been able to save. What little bit I did have saved is gone. So, but as long as I got a place to sleep, a place to eat, and if I can get some kids or people to listen, I'll have something to do. If nothing else, I'll flip hamburgers, you know, so. but I got a lot of experience in construction and heavy equipment operation and stuff like that, so I'll find something.
So do you have, despite your sentence, do you have hope that you will be freed eventually?
Yes, because of people like you.
Thank you.
You do a lot.
I wish I could do more, honestly, because it's a tragedy that there are people that are nonviolent that are locked up for years and years and possibly their whole life. But
well, you and Show Me Cannabis, they give us hope.
I appreciate that. So, for years, before we came along and before there was a whole lot, before this issue was really being talked about, did you wonder if there would ever come a day that it would be on the horizon?
I figured sooner or later it'd be legalized because of what it is. I mean, I know a lot of times I used it out there because I had aches and pains, and it helped them. And I knew sooner or later people would realize it. I don't know if it's going to be in my lifetime or not, but sooner or later it's going to happen. Why fight the inevitable,
Yeah.
But I didn't have a whole lot of hope. I kept fighting things in court. But as you know, our court system, it used to be that you're innocent until proven guilty. It ain't like that anymore. People can dream all they want, but it's not. You're guilty until you prove you're innocent. That's the way it is anymore, unfortunately. I know a lot of guys in here that just, I've read their cases, and from what I can see, I can't believe it. I don't know a whole lot about law. I know I've filed quite a few things in the court system, and if you don't have a lawyer, they're really not even going to look at it.
Yeah. And it's
no matter how good it is.
Courts also don't like to go back and review something that they consider to be final and settled because they think, well, we've already looked at this and that's the ruling that's been made and not going to revisit it a lot of the time.
Exactly, especially if you don't have a lawyer.
Yeah.
I understand, and I've seen this on TV where a judge actually said they had two piles. This pile's without lawyers, this pile's with lawyers. Usually this just gets pushed aside and they look through these.
I can believe that.
I've seen that on TV. So, and this is from a guy that used to be a judge. He is now working as a lawyer. If I'm not mistaken, he's out of Illinois now. I'm not positive. But, so, it's a system, and what's happened to me can happen to anybody. I mean, if they want you, they're going to get you. And that's whether you're guilty or not.
Yeah. So that's pretty much most of the questions I had. Do you have anything else you'd like to add while we're here?
Well, I'd sure like to see people out there voting and get this passed. I understand I have a whole lot of people out there helping me, and I appreciate it. Of course, Dan Beats, you, Show Me Cannabis, Amber. You've done a lot.
It's our pleasure to do it. It's the right thing to do. So
my main concern is that I forgot about it. Because yeah, it's in the news now, but how long is that going to be? And how long have people got their attention span? Is our governor holding off, waiting, hoping people forget? That's what's on my mind. Fortunately, there's been quite a few reporters, and Show Me Cannabis that's keeping it alive, that's giving a little shout here and there, keeping it in people's minds. But if none of that comes through, I understand y'all are trying to put a bill in for 2016. That's my last hope.
Yeah, and that's certainly our intention to let any nonviolent cannabis-only offenders to be freed with that, because that's, we just look at what's happened in Colorado and Washington, and we approve of those things, but it's they did that and they didn't free any of the people that were locked up on what they had just made legal.
Mm-hmm.
And to us, that doesn't seem right. It seems like if you're going to make it legal, then you should go back and look at the cases of people that have been convicted under those old laws that were never just to begin with.
Well, I agree they weren't just, but in a sense, most of us probably did break the law that was written at that time. So I can see having a little punishment on it, but it kind of went to the extreme on marijuana.
Yeah. And especially in your case.
Yeah, especially in my case. But, I'm not the only one. I think I read there's 25 other people over the country.
Mm-hmm. I think it might be a little bit more than that, but it's a fair number of people that have life sentences for marijuana.
Right.
Most of them were for larger amounts than yours, but it's still.
Well, I know they had a drug cartel guy in that was caught with thousands of pounds, and he did so much time. He's supposed to have a life without, and he's out.
Yeah.
I mean, how's that happen? When I first got locked up, the guy that put me in the cell with, this was at Fulton, he had just got caught with 600 pounds. Right? And he got 6 years. And it was his third offense. He was driving all the way from Mexico. What's this country coming to? I thought law was supposed to be even. They're going to make a law so you can't do this. Okay, well, it's a 10-year sentence. Everybody should get 10 years. Not this guy 1, not this guy 20.
Yeah, it seems like a big range there from 6 to life without parole.
Yeah. I ain't figured it out. I try to go to the law library and read up on things and learn. Of course, they got computers in there now. They made it real hard. I'm not computer savvy. Most of us ain't in here. They took all the books away and put computers in. I don't know if that was to make it harder on us or try to force us to learn how to use computers. But, what I can read, it's all set up against us anyways. It seems like I say, the court system, if you ain't got a lawyer, how many people in here can afford a lawyer? Or especially the way the financial situation is out on the street with your families. You can't expect them to come up with money and take it away from the families. I don't expect that. I try not to ask my family for anything. That's another reason why I work. I try to support myself.
It's certainly a difficult system if you don't have the financial resources to hire somebody, and it definitely makes it tough.
On the other hand, if you had the money to start with, you probably wouldn't be in here.
There's a lot of truth to that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that has got caught more times and with more stuff than what I ever seen in my life. I've never seen a day.
Well, like you were saying about the guy that was the head of the drug cartel. Drug cartels have a lot of money, so they can afford to hire very good lawyers and get their guys out if they need to. So.
And see, on us, it's so hard because the first 10 years, so you try to learn what you can do with the law. The next 5 years or so, then you think you know what you're doing with it. Then after that, you know a little more about it, and then they tell you, well, it's too late. You can't claim any of that because your lawyer didn't claim it. Your public defender didn't use that. Well, how fair is that? It's right there in front of their nose, and they don't use it. And then we suffer because you can't bring that up because they didn't bring it up.
So do you feel like you got inadequate representation at your trial?
My trial at the 29-15 hearing said, the lawyer said his defense was no defense at all. He got on the stand in the 29-15 hearing and said that because the state had to prove their case and they didn't have it. But yet I'm still in here. So I can't say I did, I can't say I didn't. Like I say, truly, they're supposed to prove their case. I'm in here. unfortunately, you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent anymore. It ain't like it used to be, innocent until they prove you guilty. If you're charged with something, 90% of the people are going to think you're guilty of it, whether you are or not.
That's probably true. It's an unfortunate fact, but yeah, it's there's a very little presumption of innocence once you actually get into a courtroom.
Right. So, I don't know how they can change it back the way it used to be, or it should be. Unfortunately, I doubt whether they ever do, but if you're not a lawyer, you ain't got no money, you're going to be stuck in a place like this, like me. It can happen to anybody. If you get a prosecutor out there or somebody that wants you put away to make their points, or whatever the reason, it's going to happen. So, I don't know. In my case, I've never dreamed. I didn't even know you could get a life sentence for marijuana, let alone life without. Especially since I know people that have been caught 10 and 20 times in the same county that I've been caught.
It doesn't seem to be evenly applied. It often depends on what the prosecutor wants to do and what the judge will allow, and but it's not something that's uniformly applied a lot of the time.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But they get the law so twisted up, and it's if you're not a lawyer, you can read a case and to you it says this thing, and then they send back and say, oh no, it means this, and I guess they can read it any way they want to read it, and there's nothing we can do about it, nothing I can do about it. So, fortunately, we have some good lawyers out there that are actually willing to fight for some guys and willing to do what they're supposed to do. And I think most of them intentionally do. But sometimes I wonder how many deals are made before the court ever went to, before the lawyers ever got to court with the prosecutors. I don't know that to be true, but it makes a person wonder.
I think it's like 95% of cases are now plea bargained out as opposed to taken to trial. So I mean, in most cases, there's never a trial. There's just prosecutor meets with the defense attorney, hammers out a deal, and that's what the person takes. So that's the right to trial by jury is actually sort of often the thing of the past, because if you don't take the plea bargain, then they're going to hit you with the harsh sentence, which I think is sort of what happened in your case.
Well, there's quite a few reasons, and one of these days those reasons will come out that I didn't take a plea bargain. They wanted me to take 30 years to start with.
It's an awful long time.
Considering I was told even by when I first come in that I only had a life sentence. I figured the life sentence is only 30 years. What am I gaining?
Yeah.
Besides that, I'm truly not guilty of what I'm actually charged with. I'm not saying I'm not guilty of nothing, but I'm not guilty of that. So with my right to take it to trial, unfortunately, they hammer you if you do.
Yeah.
And I think that's wrong.
Thanks for joining us this week. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Jeff Miszansky, and we will see you next week. Thanks a lot.
Show Me Cannabis, fighting to reform Missouri cannabis laws. Find us at show-mecannabis.com, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Together, we can reform Missouri cannabis law.
Great work by John Payne there with Show Me Cannabis, and the tale of Jeff Miszansky is one of so many in this war on Americans, a war on us, and we are ending it vote by vote, state by state. Make sure you get involved. If you're not in a state that's voting on reform, support the states that are. They could use your money, they could use your time. If you can volunteer to phone bank, you can do that from anywhere. Please help if you can. We need to free our POWs, and that doesn't happen until we legalize, until we can fight for their rights as fellow citizens instead of presumed criminals. Thanks for joining us. That's all the time we got today. I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
For me.
This is the Russ Belville Show.